It was a sharp, purposeful tap on the door rather than a nice, "May I borrow some sugar?" kind of knock, and entitled the sort of insult you would anticipate from someone who believed they owned the establishment, or at the very least, something. About that knock made me wonder if I should stand in the hallway and stare at the door as if it would bite me if I came too close. Seemed like a warning, but when has Grace, my ex-wife, ever been tactful? Opened the door and saw my ex-girlfriend Grace wearing expensive clothing. With sunglasses on her head like she was trying out for a reality show, she probably couldn't afford it. Daniel, the man she had married after me, was standing next to her as someone watched. She left me for a man whose smirk made you want to punch him first and then ask him questions. But he didn't do that. Grace didn't waste any time in saying anything at first, instead examining me from head to toe as if I were something he had scraped off his shoe. I leaned against the door frame and crossed my arms. "But Thomas, aren't you going to invite us inside? Did you bring a present, which is often what guests do?" Her smile briefly wavered, but she swiftly recovered, turning, "Her charm is on full blast. We're here to talk, not to make small talk." Business Daniel at last spoke, his tone brimming with phony earnestness. "We have some legitimate rights on Father's inheritance, and it would only be just if we resolved them similarly to adult legitimate claims." Couldn't stop laughing. "You're kidding, Grace. You signed the divorce documents, and now you believe you have a claim to my father's property?" Grace appeared, her perfume intoxicating. "Thomas, don't act irrationally," as she entered my personal space. "You are aware of how close I was to your father, and he loved me, yes, until I interrupted him. Listen to Tom." Daniel's grin widened as he said, "Rewrite history just because you want a payday. Only my pals call me Tom. And the last time I looked, your Daniel's jaw tensed, but he persisted, saying, 'Look, this home is Grace, who was worth millions, spent years with this family. And as her spouse, I believe it's only appropriate that we talk about what part of the estate is hers, and consequently, to us.' The outrageousness of the man was nearly remarkable. I responded bluntly, 'You're not getting a penny.' However, before I could respond in a less courteous manner, a voice behind me said, 'Well, this is Eleanor, my lawyer,' entered the room and stated, 'Interesting conversation.' With her tablet in one hand and her leather suitcase in the other, she smiled with the kind of composed assurance that, 'Thomas, won't you introduce me to Grace?' Her face plummeted as she gave you the impression that she could defeat an army with just her pin. However, Daniel's smirk had changed to something more ambiguous, and he asked in a tone that Eleanor Price, balancing curiosity and irritation, stated, 'Thomas's lawyer, and you must be Daniel, the one who believes he can enter here and claim something that isn't his. Your even attorney Grace was more audacious than I had anticipated.' Repeating her confidence and explaining why I mentioned stepping aside to allow Thomas to get legal counsel since, in contrast to some people, I prefer to be organized. I thought you may pull something similar as Eleanor stepped fully into the doorway. She opened her briefcase and pulled out, 'Your timing is perfect,' she exclaimed to Grace, Daniel, Thomas, and me as we were leaving. 'A folder thicker than a dictionary. Regarding Mr. Harrison's will, are you aware of the section that clearly states who has and does not have any?' Daniel went forward, puffing up his chest, but Grace's cheeks lost color as she made a legal claim to the inheritance. 'This isn't over,' he said, adding that you can play the legal game like a rooster in a barnyard. 'All you want, Eleanor, but we have rights and will see you in court if necessary.' 'I'm depending on it,' she said with a charming smile as she put the folder back in her briefcase. Grace screamed, barely maintaining her control as she drew Daniel back. Daniel sent him a final scowl over his shoulder as they backed off down the driveway, but it wasn't the end. I called after them and shut the door, saying, 'Thomas, we'll be back, looking forward to it,' and faced Eleanor, who was already going through her notes. 'Well, that was entertaining,' she murmured. But you'd better, Thomas, fasten your seatbelt. This is only the beginning. I nodded, feeling the burden of my father's legacy meant the world to me, and if Grace and Daniel believed they could take it away from me, they would. After Grace and Daniel's abrupt departure, I sat down in the living room to discover how mistaken they were. Eleanor was already taking out more documents from her briefcase, and her face was more observant than ever. She slid a big file across the coffee table in my direction and remarked, "You're right." I opened the file and discovered that my father had foreseen this and had been careful to prepare for just such a stunt. Countless pages of court filings, financial papers, and letters that my father had discreetly collected overseeing a map of a battle strategy that I was unaware I was a part of throughout the years was overwhelming. Always been a step ahead, and now even after his death he was still leading me. "What is all this?" I asked, flipping through the pages, evidence Eleanor. "Your father didn't just write a will. He built a fortress every clause," she said, leaning back and crossing her legs. "Every contingency, it's all designed to protect his fortune from people like Grace and Daniel. He knew they'd try." "You're saying that he anticipated this, Eleanor?" Something like this made my stomach turn. "Agreed. He began making arrangements as soon as Grace left you, since he thought she was only with you for the money, and his concerns were validated when the divorce took place. When Daniel joined the scene, your father became even more wary. He didn't trust one of them." I leaned. "What's the strategy now, Eleanor?" I'm back in the chair, feeling the weight of my father's insight. "First, we'll make sure the will is exactly how your father meant by tapping her pen against her notebook. I had a hunch that things would change when my father left me, and Grace and Daniel believed they had this figured out. However, they had no idea what they were getting into or who they would face the following morning. Eleanor arrived, on schedule, carrying a sealed envelope and a little leather-bound journal. She was carrying a weight. Her look conveyed to me that whatever she had brought wasn't merely another legal tactic. Rather, it was she handed me the journal first, saying, "This was personal. It belonged to your father." During his final year, I took the journal carefully and ran my fingertips over it, knowing that things were about to get out of control. My father, Richard, had always been a quiet man over the worn leather cover. Considering that he preferred writing down his ideas over speaking them out loud, this journal felt like a part of him. Eleanor motioned for me to open it as I hadn't seen what was inside before. Ideas, intentions, and suspicions, but above all, the truth about Grace. I sat when I opened the journal at the kitchen table. The first few pages had entries concerning my father's deteriorating his worries about the future and his will to preserve the family's heritage. But as I turned the pages, the tone changed on March 15th. Grace is not who Thomas believes her to be. Although I had thought their love would be sincere, it's now evident that she entered his life with hidden agendas, was only ever interested in what she believed she could get. I've been keeping a close eye on her, and the symptoms are all there. Covert phone conversations, mysterious travel, and now, Daniel, I stopped speaking. My father knew more deeply than I thought that he had witnessed what I would not admit throughout my marriage to Grace's. I opened another page and saw that the betrayal was not merely personal. It had been planned. April 2nd. Daniel is dangerous because he doesn't give a damn about Grace. He's trying to get her access to the estate so he can take advantage of me while I'm weak, but I won't allow it. I've begun recording everything so that there won't be any space for dispute when Thomas sees the truth. Even if my hands were shaking as I closed the journal and I looked up to see Eleanor closely observing me. He was aware of what I said. Eleanor nodded, and she gave me the envelope, which I opened after making sure I had the means to defend myself. To discover, if you're reading this, a letter written by my father and addressed to me personally, Thomas indicates that the conflict has started, and Grace and Daniel have moved as I anticipated. I'm sorry you must confront this, but I want you to know that you are not alone because I have provided Eleanor with all she needs to make sure. When the truth is revealed, have faith in both her and yourself. You are stronger than you think. I believe that you and I have been undervalued by Grace and Daniel. They claim that this is about money, but in reality it's about integrity and safeguarding the journal's most important assets. There will be proof of their dishonesty, but this is just the beginning. Keep a tight eye on Thomas with love and faith in you, Dad Asterisk. The parts are already starting to come together. Even from beyond the grave, I buried the letter deep in my chest. As I faced the individuals who had attempted to split our family apart, my father was standing by my side, encouraging me. There's one, Eleanor interrupted my thoughts with another statement, reaching inside her bag and extracted a USB drive that your father had a private investigator look into. Includes audio recordings and security footage of everything he discovered regarding Grace and Danielle plants. I gazed at the force my ire deep down. What did he think of Eleanor's side meetings, with lawyers to consider contesting the will bank transfers that imply Grace was siphoning money from your joint? Daniel has been bribing individuals left and right during your marriage. I clenched my fists, the weight of their betrayal crashing over me like a ton of bricks as I tried to find out more about you and your father. Wave. They wanted to ruin what my father had achieved, not just damage me. Eleanor put a hand there. This isn't just about protecting the inheritance anymore. Thomas, it's regarding demonstrating to them that they cannot get away with this. I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of resolve settle in my chest. Let me make sure they don't. I picked up my father's journal once more and turned to a page I hadn't seen while Eleanor was packing away her belongings. However, one sentence stood out. The truth always, printed in large, purposeful letters. Comes to light, I shut the journal, and the words that kept repeating in my head were Grace and Daniel believed that they could trick me, control me, and